Language is more than words. It is the blueprint of culture, thought, and power. In this story, we trace the roots of one of the world's most influential languages, Latin, and its echo through time into modern-day English. We ask, what would a communication and education look like in America without Latin? Long before English ever existed, Latin was one of the languages of an empire. Born from the Italic tribes in what is now known as Central Italy, Latin was heavily influenced by Greek, borrowing its alphabet, philosophical structure, and even vocabulary. As Rome expanded from the 6th century BCE to its height around 117 CE, Latin evolved. Classical Latin was the language of the elite, philosophers, historians, and emperors. Vulgar Latin, the everyday spoken form, morphed regionally and would later become the Romance languages such as Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. But even as the Roman Empire crumbled, Latin lived on, in the church, in science, in law, and eventually in English, through a much later empire, the British. By the 19th century, English had become the language of American expansion. In the 1870s, a dark chapter unfolded. Native American children were taken from their families and forced into English-speaking boarding schools. The English they learned was a product of centuries of linguistic fusion after the Norman conquest of 1066. English absorbed thousands of Latin-derived words from French, words like justice, nation, liberty, and education, all from Latin. More examples could be educate, from Latin educare, meaning to lead out. Discipline, from the Latin disciplinia, meaning instruction. Obey, from obedire, to listen to. Without Latin, the English these children were forced to learn would have lacked the very terms used to civilize, punish, and teach them. Today, English is the lingua franca of the world. Over 60% of its vocabulary is Latin-based, from casual speech to academic discourse. Latin permeates every syllable. We say data and illumini without thinking twice. We pursue science, practice medicine, and enforce justice. These are not just words, they're frameworks inherited from Latin structure and Roman thought. But imagine an America without Latin's shadow. Without Latin, English would be far more Germanic, closer to Old English or Dutch. Education might not be called education, but learnings or wisdom shaping. The legal systems would lose their jurisprudence. Medicine would lose its diagnosis and prescriptions. In schools, we wouldn't speak of curricula or grades, terms all rooted from Latin. University mottos like Veritas or Lue Veritas would never exist. Scientific classification, gone. No genus, no species. We would speak, read, and think differently. Latin doesn't just live in our dictionaries. It shapes how we understand the world. From empires of stone to digital conversations, Latin has shaped the path of communication in America. It remains as unseen scaffold upholding language, law, and learning. Without Latin, English would still exist, but it would be less rich, less precise, and less powerful. It would be less than what it is today, a shadow of a global voice built on the language of Rome.